So it's finally come down to this, the Piccoletta build guide for how to spam decoys. Alright, so this is a very simple build. Alright, so first I want to go over why you should use this, if you want to use this, and what it accomplishes. So decoy spam can be really good. You have to know how to play around the decoy. There are some important things to note about decoys and enemies attacking them. Enemies won't always attack a decoy. Very often, if you have a unit that is closer to an enemy than the decoy, the enemy will often prioritize that unit over the decoy, but if the enemy can one-shot the decoy, it will always go for it. Generally, decoys will get prioritized because of their worst stats. So what we're going to do here is we'll just pass. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put Piccoletta here. And I'll put the decoy like here. So it's like basically the same distance, so we'll just see what he attacks. But generally the decoy will get attacked, and it can allow for off-tanking. So what is off-tanking? So you see there, the enemy attacked the decoy, it took some damage, it tanked a hit, it didn't die. Off-tanking is tanking like a flank or contributing to tanking. So by putting up decoys, you are putting up lightning rods that enemies tend to focus. And it also explodes for some chip damage, and this can buy you time and waste enemy turns. So the reason why this is useful is because it's like a form of tanking, and in the way that you tank is by sending a decoy out, and then enemies attack it. Great. All right. So now that we understand that, there's really three ways to run this build. There is without a battery, and I can show that in a second. So what you do is you make a decoy. Here's what I'll do here. So let's just assume Piccoletta's by herself. She's not getting batteried. I'm just going to increase her turn order. So the way to use Piccoletta without a battery is on her off turns, she either goes to set up combo like follow-up attacks with her racket or with ball toss, or she spams damage items because she has increased range and increased damage. So look at the range she has with her spells. It's actually, well, with her Firestones in this case, it's actually quite far. So she essentially is a damage mage that can also, she can hit with any element. She can hit further than most magic, aside from like some specific spells, and she has increased damage. She has increased damage and range on these stones. So if I want to like single target spike, I can use like a Thunderstone, a large Thunderstone. If you want AoE, you can put down ice. You can put down fire. So you can set up ice tiles for like Corinton passively while damaging things. You can set up ice tiles for Giovanna. You can also throw down ice and then melt it to help Azana. So like, for example, if I wanted to hit this dude with ice, and if like a bunch of enemies were pushing me, I could have her next turn melt that with a Firestone, dealing damage while setting up a puddle for like a lightning spike on water. So there's that. But basically without a battery, what she's going to be doing is spamming damage items. Now it can be expensive to spam the AoE ones, but the single target items are like 200 gold, so you really can afford to spam them to some degree. Like you'll just have to do a little bit of grinding on a fresh save, but this is mostly, like this strategy is mostly what you'd be doing on New Game Plus, is make decoy, spam items, and the thing is, you see here, this decoy hasn't died yet, so this will probably attack it, killing it. It'll deal AoE damage to both of these, and then she can make another one. So even though the decoy's out, she can spam items, and then she just needs to replace it when it dies. So, okay, so that's the first way of using her. The second way of using her is with Julio. He is really good with Piccoletta. Between the two of them, they can set up like basic follow-up attack chains. They're both kind of tanky. In her case, she's evasion tank. In his case, his ability TP barrier. The higher the TP, the less damage he takes. So it's 5% damage reduction from all sources, up to 25% damage reduction. He can also completely refill her TP. He can give her just enough TP as she needs to cast more decoys, so he can Moment of Truth every turn. He can inherit her to give her all his TP, and he can give her 2 at a time for 3 with Finish Them. So in this case, because she's going to naturally regen, he could actually just walk up and whack something. Or if you want to keep her topped off, he can just Moment of Truth every turn until enemies are close enough for him to attack with melee. So this is like the second use case, where you have one single battery, and Julio can use Moment of Truth on mages, and then attack things as needed. So you can see there she dodges quite a bit. If you actually look at her dodge, I put 2 evasion bracelets on her. Her dodge is insane. When she's on ice tiles, enemies almost never hit her. So not only can the decoy tank, but she herself can tank. And then she can also put herself on ice tiles just by doing something like this. Just use one of these large ones. So now any enemy that attacks her is going to have even less accuracy. And that's like without a decoy. Alright, so we'll have Medina fast-acting medication her. The other big upside of decoys is that they can body block. So you have some enemies that are approaching. You can force them to have bad move by putting a decoy up. So now this unit's move is cut off a little bit. He can come down this way, but he's going to be drawn to attack the decoy. I could have put it here so that like it's on ice and that they might miss the decoy. So one thing to do is if you put a decoy on like the middle of like an ice plus shape, any melee enemies that go to attack it will generally, they won't always miss, but like with 39 evasion on ice, like it'll have a decent chance of dodging and just wasting enemy turns. So between her high dodge and the decoy being a lightning rod, Piccoletta wastes a lot of enemy turns just from evasion and just from the decoy. So she's definitely good at like holding down things and wasting enemy turns. She's not as good as Eredor King Shield, so if you want like a main tank, you're still probably better off using that. But you can see here like that archer shots. So 2 enemies are going to waste their turns at minimum to attack. And then the other way to use her is to have a Medina. So you have a Medina and a Julio to run 2 batteries. So there's no battery setup. There is a 1 battery setup of just Julio. Alternatively, you could have a 1 battery of just Medina. That would be the same thing as the 1 battery Julio in a way. And then also you have a 2 battery setup. So the difference is when you have a 2 battery setup, and especially when you have Medina, you do not want to really funnel TP directly into Piccoletta. What you want to do is have her stand near like things that Medina is going to be spamming TP on, and then she just happens to also get some TP for free, and then she can just decoy every turn. So she'll contribute to damage mitigation in the form of decoys and evasion tanking. She can do damaging stones as needed. She can do tile preparation for setting up puddles. She can like throw oil jars. She can't throw oil jars further, but she can at least contribute by doing something each turn with items. She can whack for some okay damage and set up like follow-up attacks. And her decoy does take turns, and if it lives long enough, it will like attack things and trigger follow-up attacks. So, for example, if the decoy was able to act in time, it would actually attack this and then trigger a follow-up attack on Julio. So the decoy can contribute to damage, and generally it will live. Like, if there's like 1 to 2 enemies, the decoy usually lives for a while. If there's like 3 to 4 or more enemies, it'll die pretty fast, but it'll still waste turns. So, like, assuming you have other units that are like up here, the enemies will focus it because it's like it's a very appealing target. It has low defensive stats. It has low max HP. They love to attack it. So it kind of passively helps your other units be more tanky by pulling damage away from them. But overall, I rated Piccoletta as A tier. This is for Fresh Save and for New Game Plus. Her ability to spam decoys, her evasion tanking, her item spam. Like, even if you just use her as an item spammer, she can deal like 70 to 80% damage of a mage, but without the need of a battery. Like, she doesn't need a battery at all. And in some cases, she can outdamage like a Corinton if he's just using 2 TP abilities the whole time. She can probably outdamage him a little bit. And she can target weaknesses. And she has further range. So she is a good damage dealer as well. She's a decent damage dealer if you have the economy. She's a decent off-tank. But this is the build, essentially. For items, you can pretty much run whatever you want on her. You can run evasion items. This makes her more passively tanky. You could run like an evasion item and a health item, so she has a little bit more durability. Her defensive stats are decent, so she's generally reasonably tanky. Her worst stat is her accuracy, which causes ball toss and cat racket to not be super accurate. So if you want to get a lot of racket attacks off for combos and like follow-ups, you could consider running accuracy. But she tends to work best with at least 1 battery, just so that you can get decoy spam off if you need to. If you don't want to run a battery at all, she can still be good. You just have to spam items with like in between turns, so that as she's regenerating 3 TP, she's still really good in dealing damage at a good range. So she's a good unit. She just costs money. So just like how Medina costs money, these are like the 2 item units. But she's very flexible too. Like she can hit at weird angles with her her item use, similar to how a mage can just cast spells in like any height. It's not as good, but it's like pretty close. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Piccoletta. We can just in tandem her really quick. Another thing too that's nice about Decoy is it wastes turns. So for maps where you need to survive for X amount of turns, it counts as a turn every time the Decoy takes a turn, so that helps a little bit. But you can see here, if we do something like this, it's like whack this guy. So she's going to be on ice, so her accuracy will be quite bad. Apparently not, it's 100%. But she can contribute with like some whacks here and there for free if you're like low on money. But she's better off spamming magical stones every turn she can in most cases. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Piccoletta. Let me know if this video was useful or interesting, or if you have any other strategy you use with Piccoletta. Definitely like the video and subscribe. I'm going to be doing more videos like this where I go over a specific build. I'm going to try to keep it small to like the character in question and the other units that it needs. Because like a build is just like the setup. So like to use like Piccoletta effectively, I would argue you want at least 1 battery. But even without a battery, you can use a decoy every 3rd turn. You can start off with a decoy, and then you use an item, use an AoE item, use an AoE item, make another decoy, assuming it dies. And then you can just keep doing this, and she'll just contribute to damage and tanking. So, and she herself is very dodgy, so when things get in the back line, she tends to dodge at least a decent amount, especially on ice. And even more so if enemies are blinded, so she's good with Hued as well. So yeah, that's it for Piccoletta Decoy build. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you in the next video.